gentlemen, my name is Sean Millerick, and this is Marlins After Dark, almost the Marlins After Midnight edition of Marlins After Dark. Why Marlins After Dark? Because, of course, no team keeps you up late at night like the Miami Marlins. A joke that I will keep making until they let me sleep soundly. And boy, they've been asleep this offseason so far. Tonight's show starting much later than we'll usually be starting during the 2024 season. I think for the most part, gotta get this in the can. Big day with the official start of spring training. All players on hand, full squad workouts getting underway. Bruce and Pete in front of the cameras to account for themselves and lay out their vision for 2024. So I just want to get some thoughts out there, breaking that down, and also just on the activity or lack thereof that we've seen so far from the team this offseason. And yeah, this is spring training for the Marlins. It's spring training for me too here at Marlins After Dark. Next few weeks, we're trying to get back into the swing of weekly shows, talking all things Marlins baseball, and just kind of get a feel for what this show is going to be like, this year. How much of it's going to be snarky but insightful analysis? How much of it's going to be foul-mouthed frustration with the actions of the club, or just fun baseball times for all? Let me know as we do this. In the comments here on YouTube, on Spotify. Yell at me on Twitter, and let me know what kind of things you're looking for in your late night Marlins podcast. And also certainly keep an eye out for me. Other platforms, plenty of writing going on as well. You can find my work at Call of the Pen, at Marlin Maniac, at Here's the Pitch, and all that stuff tweeted out from my account at Miami Sports Minute. But today, the spring presser, the spring depresser, and just really found myself taken with Bruce's comments, and just kind of wanted to parse through what came up, what he touched on, and what stood out to me, and what he said in front of the cameras when he spoke before the media. The first thing that jumped out to me was kind of shots fired from Bruce at the fans, and I thought in a not too subtle, messaging, whether it was him mentioning the Caribbean Classic, which is very proud of. It was one of the first things out of his mouth was how many people, about 200,000 people that showed up to watch the Caribbean Classic, as if that alone was proof of concept, right? That people are out there, people who love baseball are on hand. And so if they showed up for that event, that special event with pretty talented rosters and stakes attached to them and a deep personal relationship with the fans at attendance, that'll translate over into more ticket sales, which is obviously certainly the hope that he should be shooting for. But he also mentioned that while attendance did go up at Marlins Park, and he did frequently call it Marlins Park, it is Lone Depot Park. I saw that kind of picked apart on Twitter a bit earlier today, but it is what it is. But at the Depot, he mentioned that attendance was up, but still near the league bottom. So I thought the two times during it where he called out Miami's lack of attendance in kind of conjunction with spending. At one point, he pretty much said it, and then kind of seemed to imply it at a couple other points that, hey, you want me to spend on this roster? You could spend on tickets. And it's been covered ad nauseum by myself and many others that game of chickens is not going to work out for him. But we could save that for another time. But that was the first thing that really jumped out at me. Secondly, Bruce was asked about the playoffs. Are the Marlins going back to the playoffs? What he thought of making the playoffs last season, and does he want to see Miami return to the playoffs? Does he expect them to return to playoff competition? And I'll give Bruce this. He never said when. He did say yes. He said it was important. He said he wanted a winning vision for the team, but he did not commit ever verbally that his expectation was that the 2024 Miami Marlins, go forth and do that. He talked a lot about, there were comments about the work they did rebuilding the front office, about establishing consistent winning, about telling players. I believe Jordan McPherson of the Herald asked him what kind of message he gave to the players that day, and Bruce Sherman spoke of his long-term commitment, to establishing a winning culture, here, and to also, a good player environment, something they could be proud of, best of class and all of these categories. Mentioned the Dominican Academy, mentioned the forthcoming work on the spring training complex, going for, and all these things, great, to have. Mentioned that the goal is to eventually win every year, that Pete's empowered to bring this about, to have consistent winning from the Marlins ball club. But what I would have loved to hear, and I'm still holding out hope that someone does eventually specifically ask, is to, try to hold him to the date being attached. What about 2024, Bruce? Is your expectation for the 2024 Miami Marlins to return to the playoffs? Because that, I haven't heard him said. Everything else, I just, and certainly and very obviously, I'm not a journalist. It's not picking on anyone, but just if you phrase the question any other way, how important is winning to you? Is your expectation to win? Is your expectation to compete? He could dodge, he can duck around, he can talk about the consistent winning, which is not a bad thing. That's a great thing. It's something that's been lacking. But the other part of it is that as many, of us, fans, pundits, prognosticators expect is you've got to try in 2024. You can't just, you really can't take too much of a step back. You can't do that to this market. And I just would have loved for someone to have asked him, but what about 2024 specifically? But didn't hear that happen, and he just kept working around it, talking about the down the line, focus and commitment. Another highlight from this was he mentioned MLB free agents. He talked about work being done on the roster. He kind of made light of the fact that the Marlins have not signed a superstar, and that he understands if fans are frustrated about that, which is great that he knows that. But then he mentioned that they brought in plenty of minor league free agents and MLB free agents. And as anyone who's decides that watching this is a good use of your time knows, that has not happened. There are no MLB free agents. The plural part's hilarious, but that's not taking place. The Marlins have not done so. They've still not spent a free agent dollar on an MLB roster, immediate MLB roster player. So the fact that he said that they did was kind of galling. That was probably the low point of the press conference, for Bruce, all things considered. Now, once Bruce stopped speaking, much of this was covered by Pete. Peter Bendix, president of baseball operations for the Marlins, got an opportunity to talk about his expectation of the roster, his relationship with Skip, and all that sounded positive, as did things that Skip had to say about Peter later on during media availability today. And definitely full shouts to all of the people on hand who were able to provide all this coverage. You can get this information so quickly now. Fish on First, Craig Mish, Jordan McPherson out there as well, just getting these immediate videos so we could parse through this and try to glean what's going on. So they all do a great job. Be sure to follow all of them over the course of the spring and the 2024 baseball season. But when we did get to Pete, and he echoed everything Bruce said, kind of about the front office development and consistent winning and all of that. But kind of the most specific baseball question he was asked, that I want to close on this point, is when he was asked about replacing Soler's production, and talked about that he expects Josh Bell and Jake Burger to shoulder much of that, to replace his production in the lineup. And I can't get behind this line of thinking. I appreciate, and I've had some discussions on social media today that be like, what is he supposed to say in this situation? And sure, he's not going to do the He's not going to do the most popular Moneyball meme of rich teams, poor teams, 50 feet of crap. I don't expect him to say that to a live audience of reporters, but to suggest that just again, Bell and Berger replaced Soler, then you could take your home run leader out of the lineup and not replace him with a new power source on his own. That you're just counting on Bell and Berger to make up for that production. Just it doesn't track. It doesn't track with the team that's saying that they is saying, at least, even though they're not showing it by their actions, that they care about competing this season. For the last season, so all three of them, Jorge Soler, who's very gone, Josh Bell and Jake Berger combined, they hit 56 home runs combined for the Miami Marlins in 2023. And if you're doing, the other popular Moneyball meme, you're saying if you want to do the line where we have to recreate Jorge Soler in the aggregate, then okay, you need to replace those 36 home runs. To do that, to have Josh Bell and Jake Berger do what the three of them combined to do in 2023, then okay, you've got them hitting again those 56 homers, averaging 28 apiece, and that replaces what they did together. But that's not really how it works, right? That's you want to see, you definitely would want to see a power addition there. In terms of just the message that sends, can't really see it. That's suggests that winning will take place. If you wanted to argue that Soler didn't play all that often, like he was hurt during a fair chunk of the stretch that all three of them did play together. Both Josh Bell and Jake Berger played 53 games with the Marlins over the course of August, September, and October, as opposed to Jorge Soler, who only played 36. So if you squint a bit, okay, so there's a bit of a gap there, but still, it's just I don't think that's how that works. Even particularly the September-October stretch, I should add. During that period, you had 9 home runs from Bell and Berger and 1 from Soler in September and October alone. So during the stretch run when they were making the playoffs and getting in, okay, not a lot of heavy lifting from Jorge Soler, but Soler did a hell of a lot of work to get the Marlins in position to have that winning season. And that doesn't mean that they had to re-sign Soler. In many ways, I'm glad that they did not, certainly at the price point of which he signed. Something that I think was undercelebrated over the course of the season and heading into the offseason was what a big win that contract was for the Marlins. I mean, it worked out. They did this, with multiple opt-outs. That's how the Marlins could afford players of Jorge Soler's caliber, is to give them the opportunity to bet on themselves. It blew up in Miami's face in 2022. It worked out awesomely last year, except for that little caveat of not offering the qualifying offer and getting a draft pick. But still, that was all part of the calculus. And I'd love to see them offer certainly that kind of contract again, going forward. But just to say that just having Bell and Berger all year makes up for that, I just don't get it. It seems, well, that may be true. I believe that maybe Bell and Berger could, again, average, 28 apiece. That's possible. But again, that just replaces what you did. It doesn't make you better. Miami's offense was in dramatic need of being overhauled and improvement, and it wasn't good enough by any metric other than the fact that they just happened to make the playoffs anyway last season. And so did not like that answer, even though I again appreciate that there's only so much they could say in front of all those cameras. Okay, wrapping up then for the second part of this, moving on from the press conference, just to touch on the offseason a little bit. They're workshopping the name of this segment, but sometimes it'll be me, sometimes hopefully it'll be guest as well, talking about just 3 things that we're excited about the Marlins season, and 3 things that we're down on, perhaps, or at least giving me pause at the moment. So 3 things up since I haven't broadcast in 2024 yet, I believe, at least on this channel. I have jumped on some other shows, and sure to check all those out as well. Everything that Fish on First puts out, Peter Pratt as well. Love our overseas UK-based Marlins brethren. But first thing, everything the Marlins have done with the organization, just want to stress that it's all positive. And until March 28th, I'm going to try to take a largely positive tone until the clock completely runs out on the Marlins, making some final additions to this roster of MLB talent. I'll hold off on just going scorched earth, which we've certainly seen plenty of, on Twitter. And I've written a little bit about earlier in the offseason, but choose and measured right now. Everything they've done from Peter Bendix on down, the 101 cast of thousands they have added to the front office, all the dollars being put into player development and analytics and scouting and improving the facilities. That's great. It's the kind of stuff I've wanted for the Marlins for a really long time, that if you're not going to have a first-class, payroll, then can we at least be first class at all the other little things, the off-the-field things? Why can't we have the best facilities and the best scouting, the things where dollars get stretched farther? Should be the things the Marlins aspire to be better at. They need to improve on drafting and development. They need to get better at developing offensive talent. And everything they've done there is a huge win. And this would be one of the better off seasons in recent Marlins history if they did all this, but also found the DH and a starting shortstop and maybe added a starting pitcher to make up for Sandy not being here for a year. And we'd be overjoyed. It's the fact that there's been that zero spending, right? That's the problem. But organizationally, it's all great. Plenty to be excited about. And I genuinely am. Also, flipping Stephen Oakard for Nick Gordon. Flipping your third best, theoretically, left-handed reliever who really fell off a cliff in the second half of last season to the point that he became completely unreliable, in big situations. Had fans screaming at their TVs anytime that you saw that he was being called into the game. For Nick Gordon, a player who has a lot of bounce back potential. Now, yes, he is another infielder. He might be more of an outfielder that plays the infield than an infielder that plays the outfield, but you can call him what he is. He's got some infield experience, so it might seem like just one more in the merry-go-round of middle infielders and second basemen that the Marlins have. But there's a lot to like in his profile, and I'm really excited about his potential sticking on the roster and being a useful piece to have. Now, do I think he could be a starting shortstop? Hell no, absolutely not. Zero chance. But they still need to find one of those, and the clock is ticking. But a player that fans would be excited about, far more so than Garrett Hampson, who I love watching last year, more impactful than I would expect Dane Myers to be, or certainly Avi Garcia, even though he's going to be there too. I think Nick Gordon's going to be a player that fans like watching, this year, assuming health, which has been a bit of a big ask with him. And then a lot of the other tiny moves they've made. While it's annoying that all the Marlins have done are minor league free agent moves or trades for trades for bounce back candidates, that there hasn't been that splash signing. Moves like signing Yanni Chirinos, Christian Bethancourt, Kurt Casale. These are all players with established track records of being useful, viable, players that help an organization. And I'm glad to see the Marlins taking chance on these, particularly a catcher. They got so much nothing from offensively out of catcher last year and even defensively too, outside of Nick Fortes blocking pitches, there was really nothing to latch onto about why these players were on an MLB roster, other than just established vibes and rapport with the starting staff. So, Bethancourt, Casale, they're can stick, but obviously the Marlins aren't going to carry 3 catchers. Fortes is one of them, but it should be fun to watch that battle, this spring. between Bethencourt and Kirk. Lastly, in terms of 3 down, said I was excited about the Nick Gordon move, and certainly I'm implied that I'm still hopeful that the Marlins find a starting shortstop. If that happens as well, I'm going to admit to being really concerned about what's going to happen with one of my favorite players, and I think many Marlins fans' favorite players, is that the writing really seems to kind of be on the wall for Jon Berti during his time in Miami. Love watching him. Thinks he's had so many big hits, down the stretch. Really seemed to raise his game to help get the Marlins, into the playoffs. Should be the captain of the team as far as I'm concerned. With at least as long as Sandy's on the shelf. But I question how he's viewed by this organization. I really do. You've got an aging player, 34 years old, arbitration eligible, next year, still not a free agent to 2026. And I bring that up. While that's great from a certain monetary standpoint, it's also that he's a 34-year-old who still has arbitration years left. That's so, how much, upside he has left, that's, we've probably seen his best season, at this point. You can make almost to the point you can make the argument that he has more value to the Marlins than to any other organization. But, maybe not. Maybe a couple of teams still think that he can, tap back into, more speed. He's also a speed-focused player at a time that steals have been devalued a bit because everyone's, running on the bases more. So I think that as a kind of all of that, I could certainly see Peter Bendix, while there is still some perception of value, of relatively high value, perhaps deciding to move on from Berti. And I can't even tell you that that's a bad thing. I can tell you that it's a very Rays thing, and it's what we've been told to expect moving forward. I just would prefer that the first case of that not be personally one of my favorite players on the team, and that's total fanboy, taking that approach. But I'd be very surprised if Jon Berti was on the Marlins in August of this season. Other thing that I can't be that excited about is so long to that home run spot. Mentioned it earlier, won't dive in again in depth, but I really needed them to see them sign a DH. Really kind of seems that there might only be one more transaction coming, and we're just about out of shortstops left on the market, as we'll get to in a moment. But off season, I wanted to see something done. The only reason not to sign a DH, in my opinion, on some kind of short-term deal was if you sign some kind of actual starting third baseman or better defensive starting third baseman, and then you just move Jake Berger to permanent DH. And then and Gio Urshela is still a free agent. That's still a possibility, I would imagine. But I just want to see a little more power infused in the lineup to make up for Soler. And it hasn't happened yet. And, well, again, I'll be polite about it until opening day if it doesn't happen. It's hard for me to get too excited about this roster's run potential without fixing that. And then lastly, as I kind of alluded to, Amed Rosario signed a contract today, and he'd been projected over the course of the offseason to be looking at a multi-year deal, something, in the, tens of millions, perhaps, for, to sign on with the club. He signed today for less than $2 million on a one-year deal with the Tampa Bay Rays, which is, I just, don't get. Our organization's supposed to be Rays South, which sounds funny to say, but geographically true, even if absurd. And the Marlins don't have a starting shortstop, and one of the better shortstop options left on the market. He's not really what you want defensively necessarily. There's plenty of warts there, but just under $2 million on a one-year deal. If the Marlins weren't willing to pay that, I mean, certainly Tampa's a great organization, history, track record of winning, all the things the Marlins are hoping to establish, Tampa has established. And so I could see that. I could see that case, but if a player preferring playing for the Rays as opposed to the Marlins, but I kind of also feel like if you offered him 2-4, then for about $600,000 more, he might have gotten over that, and just decided to check out the West Coast on the weekends um, during the off season. But anyway, that's all I've got for you tonight. Next week, so should be starting at an earlier time. Um, much closer to a point where maybe some of you will actually be watching this live. You can check this out. This will be available on YouTube. This will be available from my Twitter account. Again, that's at Miami Sports Minute. See there's my handle there. Find this feed there, and I will always be dropping this to Spotify on the following morning. So just kind of this one was one for me. Late start. Just wanted to get my feet wet on podcasting again this season, and those are my thoughts on what I've seen from the offseason so far and what I've heard so far from Marlins ownership. Anyway, until next time, I'm Sean Millerick, and this was Marlins After Dark.